I reckon something about my character must be tied up in this. Could be the way my folks used guilt to keep me in check when I was a kid, or maybe it's just how I'm wired. All I can tell you is that, even as a young'un, I'd sometimes jolt awake in the dead of night, sweating from a god-awful nightmare where I'd done something awful, some crime, and it was only a matter of time before the cops showed up. I was convinced I was guilty, that the proof was out there somewhere, and that they'd nab me soon. My pulse would pound like a drum, I'd shoot straight up in bed, and it'd take forever to calm down and drift back to sleep. Funny thing is, those nightmares don't haunt me anymore. When I first met my wife, she was all warmth and kindness. She'd let out this cute little laugh whenever I cracked a joke, and she charmed my mom right off the bat at their first meeting. We were hitched for 12 years, and things were pretty great early on, until about 6 months after our daughter, our first kid, came along. That's when I started noticing a shift in her. It was slow at first, creeping in over the years. 2 years later, we had a son, our second child, and that seemed to lock in her new demeanor, which only got worse as time went on. She started snapping at me and taking petty jabs at the kids. Honestly, motherhood just didn't sit right with her. I lost count of how many times I tried to sit her down and talk it out, but every attempt just spiraled into fights she'd stir up out of nowhere. Eventually, I threw in the towel on trying to mend a marriage that was broken by some mystery I couldn't crack, and we ended up living like strangers under the same roof. If you asked me what I did to earn that treatment, I'd just shrug, stumped. She was just a miserable person, never content with what we had and always chasing something more. As the kids got older, she found more excuses to be out of the house. Those distractions of hers kept piling up year after year. I'd come home from work, and we'd pass each other in the hallway as she was halfway out the door. "You handle dinner. I'm heading out." No shock there. After a while, I started seeing those words as a blessing. The evenings she was gone, the house felt peaceful. It was the nights she stuck around that got under my skin. I ended up cooking most of the meals and doing the grocery runs. I knew every item in the fridge and had the week's dinners all planned out. As the kids grew, they started leaning on me more, and I became both mom and dad to them. That just ain't right. A dad hopes his kids will be excited to see him when he walks through the door, but he knows their mom is usually the heart of their world. My kids, though, they'd stay holed up in their rooms until I got home, then come running out to hang with their old man. I barely recognized her anymore. Her mom had been unfaithful to her dad, turning cheating into a way of life. My wife saw firsthand how much that wrecked him. Her mom even threatened to take the kids away, so he stayed, enduring the pain until the kids went off to college, and then he bolted. My wife watched her dad suffer from her mom's betrayal and vowed she'd never turn out like her. Well, that was one more promise she didn't keep. The moment everything really started falling apart hit one chilly night in late March. The kids were tucked in, and my wife strolled into the living room, hitting me with those dreaded words that make any husband's stomach drop. "Mike, we gotta have a chat." No, honey, no warmth, just her voice, sharp like a teacher scolding a kid who'd messed up. She laid it out plain, she'd be spending her nights with her lover from now on. I wasn't shocked, I'd known for a while, and honestly, I felt a wave of relief, just like when she'd head out for her usual evenings. With her, less time around was always better. I'd been crashing in the guest room for ages, so her being gone would just make things easier on all of us. At first, I figured she took my calm reaction as some kind of win, but as she turned to leave, I caught a flicker of something, disappointment, maybe? Was she hoping I'd lose it, beg her to stay? To me, she was just owning up to what I'd already accepted, and like her dad, I was sticking around for the kids until they were grown and out the door. Over the next few months, we settled into this new routine, and the kids never once asked where their mom was. Did she tell them? I highly doubt it. I think they were just as glad as I was to have some peace. When spring rolled around, I kicked off the usual warm weather chores. One Saturday, me and the kids teamed up for a big spring cleaning, opening windows to let the breeze in, wiping down every surface, and polishing things till they shone. My wife had started taking off for entire weekends now, and I wasn't complaining one bit. The kids worked their tails off that day, and I couldn't have been prouder as a dad. We capped off our hard work with a feast of cheeseburgers and root beer floats, laughing like we'd earned every bite. In the weeks that followed, I tackled the jobs the kids were too young for. A windstorm had ripped a shutter off the house, so I got up on a ladder and fixed it back in place. With the windows open to the warm spring air, I slapped fresh paint on the living room, dining room, and entryway, giving the place a new vibe. I swapped out some rotting exterior trim boards and replaced worn-out weather stripping that had seen better days. Together, the kids and I got the garden ready for summer planting. We'd become a tight-knit crew, just the three of us. I do my best to keep the house in shape, but some jobs are beyond me. Every fall, I call in pros to clean the furnace, and each spring, I get the septic truck to pump out the tank. Man, that's gotta be the worst gig in the world. They dig up a chunk of grass to get to the lid, then drop this huge hose into the tank and suck out all the muck. Even on my roughest day at work, I've got it better than those guys. They do a decent job patching up the yard where they dig, but for a few weeks, you can still see the messed up dirt and torn sod. The next Friday night rolled around, and I knew the kids were off with their grandparents for the weekend. I'd clued my parents in on my wife's antics a while back, and they made it their mission to give the kids fun weekends to remind them they were loved. My kids thought the world of their grandparents. I swung by with some takeout, expecting a quiet night in an empty house, but I walked into something else entirely. There, in the living room, was my wife with her latest fling. She was parading her affair right in front of me, and this guy had the nerve to be sipping my good scotch. The affair? I couldn't care less. But the scotch? That ticked me off. I stood there as she giggled and he chuckled, and then she launched into a lecture. He was staying the weekend, she said, and they'd be sleeping in what used to be our bed. Then she tossed out that I could watch if I wanted, laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. As she rambled on, it hit me that she seemed driven to keep pushing her betrayal further each year, like the old ways of cutting me down weren't thrilling enough anymore, and she had to come up with fresh, nastier ways to tear me apart. I started wondering where this madness was headed, like it was some kind of puzzle to chew on. Her betrayal didn't sting much. I felt next to nothing for her, but I couldn't stop thinking about how to shield my kids from this mess. I didn't say a word. She probably figured I was stunned, cowed by how low she'd sunk, but honestly, I was just trying to figure out if I even cared anymore. I'd made peace long ago with the fact that the woman I'd married was gone. She stood up, let her dress fall to the floor to show off her bare body, then sauntered up the stairs to her bedroom, laughing. Her guy followed, snagging the takeout from my hand as he passed. Right then, I guess I looked like a pushover, but I'd come to see her and her sidekicks as so despicable that they weren't worth the energy to confront. I'd have let it slide, except he did one thing I couldn't ignore. He smacked me as he walked by. He chuckled, and something in me snapped. I've replayed that moment 100 times, wondering why that one act flipped everything upside down. I didn't care if he was sleeping with my wife, she meant nothing to me. He could take my dinner, I'd just grab something else and spend the weekend with my kids. But that slap. It was one step too far. I sank into a chair and started thinking hard. I could hear their first round upstairs, and I'm sure they were being extra loud just to rub it in my face. They thought it'd humiliate me, but I just kept plodding as the sun dipped below the horizon. There was a baseball bat by the front door, quick and silent. Their second round kicked off, louder than before, probably because I hadn't reacted the way they wanted. I fine-tuned my plan. In the garage, I had plastic sheets from painting projects, old clothes, and some rags I used to soak up paint drips. I knew tonight was perfect for staying under the radar, no moon, thick clouds blocking the stars, and if I kept the house dark, I could move unseen. With the lovers distracted and a shovel from the garage, I carefully peeled back the sod, doing my best to keep it in one piece. Then I dug down to the septic tank and pried it open. Their third round started after midnight, their over-the-top noises covering the sounds of my work. I grabbed the bat by the door and practiced my swing, making sure I wouldn't hit the ceiling. When I was set, I crept up the stairs and down the hall to her bedroom. Without a word, I swung hard, catching him in the back of the head and slamming his skull into hers. He was out cold, and she let out a groan, nothing like the sound she'd been making moments before. One more swing, and she went silent. Luck was on my side, their skulls weren't cracked, just knocked out cold. I tied their hands and feet with zip ties, and they stayed unconscious as I hustled to finish what I'd started. There was no turning back now. I hauled them outside, one by one, starting with him. I positioned his head over the open septic tank, finished him off, and let him slide into the muck with a dull thud, not even a proper splash. Next was her, and for a split second, I paused. My mind flooded with flashes of the woman I'd fallen for, our dates, the night I got down on one knee, the moment we stood before God and our families, promising forever. Then I ended it and sent her down into the darkness with her lover. I tossed the knife into the tank too, not willing to bet I could scrub the blood from its blade or hinge. I sealed the tank, shoveled the dirt back over the lid, and carefully laid the sod so the ground looked untouched, like nothing had ever happened. I wasn't sure my shirt was free of blood, so I burned it in the backyard fire pit. I hopped in the shower, washed the rest of my clothes, and got dressed. With the grim work done, I grabbed a flashlight and started checking every inch of the bedroom, hallway, and stairs for any trace of what I'd done. Weeks later, it hit me that I'd almost forgotten about the shovel used in that ugly business. I found a smear of blood on the handle, so I burned the wooden part and soaked the metal in bleach before chucking it at the dump. One last job before dawn. I snagged his car keys, drove his ride to the roughest part of town, and ditched it there. On the walk back, I tossed the keys into different sewers, starting about a mile from the car, one by one. It was a long trek in the pitch-black night, but nobody noticed me, just another guy blending into a street full of shadows. When the sun came up, I went over the house again, top to bottom. I got lucky, real lucky. If I'd cracked their skulls, I'd probably still be scrubbing bloodstains. As it was, those plastic sheets in the garage stayed unused. My folks dropped the kids off Sunday evening, just in time for me to whip up dinner for the 5 of us. What did we have? Cheeseburgers and root beer floats, naturally. My mom noticed I was in high spirits and said so, and I just grinned and told her, I had the weekend to myself, and now my favorite people are back. She asked, when's she coming home? I shrugged and said, beats me, and I couldn't care less. That was all I needed to say, and she didn't push it. Come Monday, I called in sick and loaded up boxes of her clothes, dropping them off at Goodwill stores in a few nearby towns. I threw out her makeup at the public dump, stuffed in a bag of kitchen scraps, and her jewelry went in another bag. Getting rid of the jewelry stung a bit, but I knew that's where I could mess up. Besides, I hadn't bought her any in years, everything I tossed was just proof of her string of betrayals. I figured her boss would call about her absence in a few days. It took 2. I told them I hadn't heard a peep from her. So, I took the one thing she'd left me, her honesty about her betrayal, and headed to the police station to file a missing persons report. When they grilled me about why I'd waited a couple of days, I laid out the sorry tale of my wife's years of cheating, explaining that I just assumed she'd taken off with her latest fling. They asked for the name of her current boyfriend, and I gave them a blank stare, channeling my best, "You've gotta be kidding me" look. After a beat, I said, "You think I'd bother learning his name? I figured out a long time ago that she's got her life, I've got mine, and I'll divorce that unfaithful woman once my kids are grown and gone." They seemed to buy it, or at least they didn't push back. A couple of weeks later, the cops showed up at my door and said their best guess was that she'd run off with her new guy. I just nodded, muttered, "Good riddance" to her, and wrapped up the short chat with, "If you track her down, mind giving me a heads up?" They chuckled at that, probably thinking I was half joking, and that was the last I saw of them. That was 5 years back, and let me tell you, those have been the best 5 years of my life. I waited a year, then got a divorce, citing abandonment, and it went through without a hitch. The kids asked about their mom a handful of times, but they seemed fine with her being gone, never shed a tear over it. I'll admit, every time I get the septic tank pumped, I get a little nervous, wondering if something might turn up. But I figure the flesh has long rotted away, and the bones are settled at the bottom. I say a quiet thank you that they were naked when I got rid of them, no clothes to worry about floating up and gumming up the pump. That'd be a tough one to explain, unless the guy running the truck's been through a divorce himself. Now, if you'll pardon me, I've gotta hit the bathroom. I've never appreciated a good flush as much as I do these days. Every time I send it all down the pipe, I imagine my little gift flowing straight to the final resting place of my cheating wife and her last side piece. And that's the end of my tale for today. If you got a kick out of it, give me a shout out or share your thoughts somewhere folks can see. It helps spread the word about my stories. If you're just stumbling across this, stick around, there's plenty more where this came from. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time with another one.